The first Q&A of the day will be for Senate District 62, where we have one candidate seeking endorsement, Omar Fateh. A note on this, Omar Fateh has lost his voice earlier today, or at least was contacted about that earlier today. So Dawson Kimyon, who works on Omar Fateh's campaign, will be standing in for him. In order to accommodate this and to be transparent for the body, their campaign was sent the copy of the questions a little bit ahead of time so as to allow Omar Fateh to write out his answers to be conveyed to this body. So that is how we will work with receiving Omar Fateh's responses. Dawson, if you want to unmute yourself and start off with the introduction.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks, Tim, and thanks for being accommodating. Omar does have laryngitis from COVID. So he worked really hard on typing out some last minute answers to the Q&A, but then he went to sleep. So I work for Omar on the campaign. I also work in an official capacity as his legislative assistant. For those who were not part of DSA, DSA was very much involved in Omar's first election in the year 2020, when he was challenging a more kind of establishment incumbent who had been there for a long time. And we couldn't have won that race without the support of Tcdsa. And we were grateful for your partnership both in that election, but also throughout the many trials and tribulations of the year 2020, the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent unrest, as well as dealing with mutual aid and things like that. And I think that we carried that partnership very strongly into the Capitol. We were happy to work with organizers that we met, at least through Tcdsa, who were working on organizing at the University of Minnesota. I've been happy to work with you guys, especially in the advocacy space. Being in the Senate minority, obviously, we don't have a whole lot of power to pass sweeping universal systems changes. So a lot of the work that we've done with Tcdsa has been more in that sort of advocacy sphere, being topical, taking strong positions on matters of public interest, especially when it comes to socialism. And I think that for us, Tcdsa, there's a lot of sort of stuff that happens in politics that's more nitty gritty. But Tcdsa is sort of our bedrock when it comes to these deep philosophical and ideological fights. And so with your support, we'd love to carry this partnership into another session, given that redistricting is done after every 10 years on the year after a census. Omar has had 1 2-year term, or is going into the second half of his first 2-year term, and will run again for a 4-year term in the year 2022. He has every intention to continue to run and govern the way that he has, which is as a strident, outspoken socialist. And I think this has been a great partnership that we'd very much like to continue. So with that, I have his answers to the questions.
Awesome. I think I will do is I'll run through the list, and as we go through, read back the answers that he has provided. The first of which, for the first question from Omar Fateh, it is, how would you describe your politics, and in particular, your relation to the DFL? And how do you envision your relation to future DFL leadership in the Senate?
Omar writes, the simplest way to characterize my politics in contrast to the party is that I'm a socialist. The way I see it, there are 3 socialists in the Senate DFL, myself and my colleagues, Senator McEwen and Senator Marty. The center of gravity in the DFL is firmly in the capitalist camp. There's also a progressive wing of the party that agrees with the socialists that we must invest in people's basic needs. They believe in progressive taxation as well as fully funding public education, healthcare as a right, spending money on addressing homelessness, and so on. Where we stand out as socialists is in our willingness to name capitalism as the problem and capitalists as the political enemy. We see most of the problems facing our state as being interconnected. Over-policing is a consequence of inequality. Crime is a consequence of poverty, lack of education and opportunity, as well as healthcare and housing. Because we see these connections, we are much more vocal in the face of opposition. There's also a liberal wing of the party and a conservative wing. which I would say are currently control of leadership of all three bodies of government in coalition with one another. Members of government are individuals, and we often work together across the spectrum, but ultimately we cannot live with the conservative or liberal DFL caucus or governor. They don't share our beliefs or worldview. I believe the future of the DFL party for socialists is to elect more socialists and progressive Democrats until the point where we have a progressive/socialist governing majority in all three branches. There will still be a disconnect between the socialists and the DFL party as a whole, but we will have much more power to make our most popular ideas into reality.
Thank you. The next question that we have, considering the opposition both outside of and inside of the DFL, how will you advance the Minnesota healthcare plan?
Omar writes, at one point, every DFL member of the House and Senate were signed on in support of MHP, including Senator Tom Bach. What this tells me is that every member understands how well supporting single payer stands up at the ballot box. Where MHP doesn't do well is with healthcare managers, hospital executives, and insurance companies. The default DFL view is to support a public option. We are currently in the process of forming an MHP caucus for which I am co-chair, and with that, galvanizing support for the MHP plan, which will include statewide barnstorming. When there is active mobilization in support of the Minnesota Health Plan, DFL members will sign on. We won't pass MHP anytime soon, given control of the Minnesota legislature, but our goal is to make this a top platform plank of the DFL, which will also help win elections outstate, where access to healthcare, literal, geographic, and proximity-related access is being destroyed by vulture capitalism.
Thank you. The next question we have, if Tcdsa endorses you again in 2022, how would you like to see your relationship and work with the chapter look differently than it has over the past 2 years?
I am proud of my relationship with DSA over my first term. We were able to collaborate on issues both inside and outside of the legislature. That being said, I think there's room to grow in terms of our organizing efforts, especially as more DSA members enter state government. Our organizing efforts are limited in that the voice of Minneapolis and St. Paul means very little to many members outstate. That being said, Tcdsa members are expert organizers, and we have connections all over the state, as well as with interest groups like labor. Last session, we organized successfully for regions by building a coalition, for example.
Thank you. If re-elected, how will you maintain accountability to the movement and your constituents and use your influence and power to those ends? And how will you hold yourself accountable?
He says, in our first year, we've observed that our colleagues' governance reflects their power/financial base, their constituents, and who their friends are. My power base comes from the progressive energy of my district, and my constituents are solidly Bernie Sanders Democrats or socialists. Right now, we have a pretty strong South Side and activist social circle with progressive champions at the county, city, state, and federal level. The way that we hold each other accountable is by continuing to organize together. In 2020, 2021, and 2022, we've remained connected through elections, direct action, and labor organizing. Every year there has been an election in Minneapolis and will be until 2027. There will be challenges and disagreements, but I believe we'll continue to be a strong coalition and will continue to get stronger. On a more direct note, I consider myself answerable to Tcdsa as an early partner in an organization that most directly represents my worldview. I hope I have built some trust with Tcdsa and have lived up to our high standards as an organization. Please continue to utilize me as a partner, and we will continue to reach out to the organization as well.
The next question is, the Republican-controlled Senate will continue to block the most basic public safety laws to prevent gun violence, as they have for decades. Regardless of a lawmaker's opinion, how will you help the Senate agree that victims and survivors deserve expanded, well-funded direct services?
Omar writes, I think the question itself contains the answer. There is gridlock when it comes to doing anything on guns. At the same time, both parties want to be seen as pro-survivor. The GOP wants to do this to humiliate and shame the DFL as soft on crime, and the DFL wants to do this to stand up for survivors without alienating gun owners. If there is a bill we should introduce on this, let us know.
And then the last question that we had submitted, would you be in support of or would you propose a bill that ends cash bail?
He writes very short, yes, we need to end cash bail, which is a racist, classist, corrupt system, which has proven to be ineffective.
All right. That was the extent of the submitted questions that we received. Thank you, Dawson, for reading out Omar Fateh's responses. And with that, I think we'll move on to the next person. Thank you very much for joining us.